Welcome to the Healing My Parts podcast, a podcast dedicated to educating and raising awareness about dissociative identity disorder, also known as DID. We are your hosts, the system behind Healing My Parts, which also includes parts that function as a therapist and leader in a mental health niche space. We'll be sharing tips and tools that have helped us and many others, while also sharing insights from our own journey of living with the condition. We'll also be hosting guests for conversations to help educate, dispel myths, and most especially help those living with dissociative identities and professionals who treat the condition. Thank you so much for tuning in. And now, let's get healing. Welcome to the Healing My Parts podcast, everyone. We are so excited today to have our really good friends, Adrienne Co, with us today. We are going to talk about system responsibility and who knows what else. Knowing us, we could go almost anywhere today. Instead of reading a formal bio, I am going to ask them to tell us a little bit about themselves and what they would like you to know. And then we will dive into conversation. So welcome, friends.
Hi, I'm really grateful to be here. Thank you for creating the space. I have not been very vocal these days, so I think it'll be nice to say a little bit about us, what we've been up to, and then just kind of say hi to the community, especially those who've been following our journey for a while. So, hi, I'm Adrienne Co, couple of parts representing the system today, and really moving away from the identity of Dr. Fletcher, which I know brings up a lot for people. It also brings up a lot for my parts. And system responsibility is so important to be talking about. So I'm glad we're doing that. It is one of the hardest topics, I think, because it can bring up a lot for different parts. And it can be hard to get to when you don't have a lot of co-consciousness yet, or you're still learning about your system. So hugely important conversation to have. So great topic. What we've been up to lately is we've really stepped out of mental health, the field of mental health, and we are actually taking a major step back from advocacy, which is why I have not been so front and center with that. And we can talk a little bit about why. And I'm really moving into a new career of business, finance, and investing, which I'm super excited about. The parts are excited about. And it's a whole new area that I've always wanted to explore, but didn't have the confidence to. And since stepping away from my marriage and asking for a divorce and just getting more clarity on what I want for my future, for my part's future, and my new partner's future, I'm really excited to dive in, but it's scary and terrifying. And I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm learning and I'm loving it. And so, yeah, and I think that also speaks to system changes and agreements and exploration, because when you are known for being one way, other people have the expectation, or even some of your parts might have that expectation. And being able to grant system permission to explore and dive into other possibilities, whether that's relational, career stuff, hobbies. And sometimes I think those of us in trauma recovery can get pretty rigid and stuck in certain ways of doing, even if they're working, but to really grant yourself permission to explore. So that's kind of a little bit of a nutshell of what's been going on right now. And I'm just excited to dive in and see where we go. It's always a delight to talk to you all and hang out with you. And yeah, I'm open for anything today.
It'll be fun. I'm glad to know that you're up to, just a couple of things. Super busy as always, right? The beauty of having a system is the multi-talents that can come together to create this incredible tapestry we call life.
Yeah.
Which, in full disclosure, right, it doesn't always feel beautiful, but
no,
it ends up being beautiful typically with the right perspective.
Yeah.
So for people who don't know, because there definitely will be folks that are listening who have no idea what we're referring to when we say system responsibility, how would you define that for folks?
Yeah, I think I would define system responsibility as, we are many parts under one umbrella. And although we all might have different thoughts, attitudes, behaviors, likes and dislikes, as a collective system, it's really important to get to places of agreement, but then also taking accountability and system responsibility for the actions, behaviors, or words of other parts. And that can be incredibly challenging, because if you don't have full co-consciousness and you're not aware of what some of your other parts are doing, sometimes it means taking accountability for saying, hurtful words to a friend when not all parts agreed with that statement. Maybe there's some underlying truth to what a part said, but maybe they said something out of anger and it could have been said differently. And so working together as a system to work on things like delegating responsibilities and taking ownership for what the physical body does, it can be a lot. And it certainly can bring up a lot of shame when it's a word or behavior you yourself might not have done ever, but another part did. And so you're responsible as a system for taking accountability. And it's exhausting and it can be frightening and it can bring up shame for sure, even though there may not be anything to be ashamed about, but it can certainly put people in a shame spiral. I know I've certainly been there a time or two.
There must not be anyone who's a system who hasn't at least been in the embarrassment or shame spiral based on a part going a little rogue or a lot rogue.
Right. Yeah.
There are folks that feel or that sound really surprised when you talk with them about system responsibility, because I've heard, I'm sure you have too, right? Lots of people, especially in the beginning of their process, where they're like, well, that wasn't me. That was another part that did that. Nothing I can do about it. When we're saying, well, it came out of that body that you're living in. And so therefore you are collectively responsible for it as well.
Yeah, it's a really hard thing because, with DID, it doesn't feel like those other parts are part of you, especially when there's so much amnesia or disconnect, right? And it gets tricky because I really thought about this because I had a new part show up this winter that I did not know, that I had no communication with, and it was being so mean to Mabel. Mabel is my current partner, for those of you that don't know. She also lives with DID. Her story is her story to share, but in terms of our relationship, I was going through a lot of fear. I was dealing with the discovery of a recent deception. I was walking through a divorce. And so this other part was showing up to protect me and actually to protect her, but wasn't acting that way at all. It was trying to get away and like run away from her, but was saying awful things, trying to end our relationship, which brought up a great deal of pain for her. And without me having the awareness of these things that were being said or that were happening, it was heartbreaking for me as the person living with it, because now I'm having to take responsibility for causing somebody I love pain when it wasn't even a part of me that I knew yet. And it's still hard, and it's still hard to have those conversations because I have to repair the damage and the hurt that's been done, and it impacted her system's ability to lean in and trust me fully, right? And to not, and to trust that that's not going to happen again. Now luckily, I knew with her saying what she was saying, I was going to have to do something about it. And so I did go do a week of intensive healing and worked on it. And since then, that part has not resurfaced. I believe it's integrated, but I don't know for sure. And so again, that just brings up system responsibility. And that was very, very painful for both of us, for me and for her as a partner. And to even to feel that like, oh, I don't know if this is going to happen again. It doesn't feel like it is, because I would get these bodily sensations and this overwhelming feeling like something was taking me over, and then I would be out pretty much. And I haven't had that experience since, and I've done a lot of work around it. It was actually pain from childhood that was, and terror that was leading to this. And sure, it would be real easy for me to say, well, that wasn't me. And I'm sure that came out of my mouth, a couple of times, and try in that repair process and trying to hold space and validate and have empathy. But I mean, this is what we're talking about, like people with DID, and all adults, though, all adults can go unhinged and say and do hurtful things. But I truly believe it's about taking accountability and then teaching that part or getting to know that part. And if you don't live with parts, really having a hard look at yourself. What is the trigger? What's the origin root of things? Where do you need to take accountability? And then it's not going to be the I'm sorry's. It's going to be the behavior change that's going to make the difference for the people that you're trying to repair with. And it's hard. It's not easy. Most people do run away from that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. The ones who have great internal communication, but also especially the ones who don't really even have it established yet,
Mm-hmm.
where they suffer from such incredible overwhelm. Like, what do you mean I have to be responsible for this part that I don't know anything about this part? I can't even talk to this part. I'm not conscious for this part. What do I do? Where do I start?
Mm-hmm.
How do you do this?
Yeah.
For those people, like, where would you point them as a starting point?
Yeah, I think right. Well, first and foremost, listening. And it's hard, right? Because if you have people around you that are abusive or are gaslighting, you're not going to be able to hear feedback from them because you're not going to be able to trust it, right? So, but if a loving, healthy person in your life comes to you and says, hey, like this was really hurtful to me, or this happened and I don't feel okay with it, even if you don't remember all of it, you've got to be able to validate somebody's feelings first and foremost. What I'm hearing you say is this happened and it made you feel, and then make the commitment. I'm going to take that information and I'm going to do what I can to work on doing that differently. And then maybe writing down. For me and my parts, I try to get them to write stuff down. What do you know to be true? What do what doesn't feel right? And then just putting it down on paper. You can even try to write notes to your parts if you're having trouble just doing like whatever it is, guided imagery and inner checking in. And I also would assign another part to handle some of the and I actually had even told Mabel, like, if this other part shows up, please ask for age. Like, age can diffuse other situations with the other parts. She's like the communicator between some of the other ones. You can ask for her. It doesn't mean that you're favoring any other part, but she's kind of like the internal self-helper. So if I'm not present and I can't get back, you can ask for age, and sometimes that'll cause a shift. So you can also, depending on where you are, right? Because we all know it's so different. Like, some people have access, some people don't. You can also, though, start asking some of the other parts for help. And sometimes they'll answer and sometimes they won't.
Yeah.
So I think it's about like writing things down, looking at behaviors, asking loved ones what they're observing with just a willingness to listen. You don't even have to agree, just listen. And then start to teach the parts different skills. So what I ended up doing was kind of utilizing age as the internal self-helper to get me information about what was happening, and then keeping some of those little parts kind of tucked away so that they're not having to deal with like the adult intensity of the emotions. And then thinking about, before I got full access to the part, what can we do to slow down the intensity? So it ended up being like, I gotta get out energy. So I gotta power walk, I gotta listen to loud music, and I gotta move that energy to regulate the nervous systems to prevent that other part that I didn't know from coming forward and taking over. And it really, what that was coping skills to deal with a tremendous amount of fear and terror that wasn't related to Mabel or our relationship at all, and had everything to do with the younger parts being terrified of what was happening to me behind closed doors with walking through a divorce.
When you were doing that, did you feel like you had the sort of like looking at that part through a lens of gentleness and compassion, understanding that even though it was such an intense upheaval and you had mentioned being in a shame spiral a few times, were you able to kind of hold that lens of, I know that ultimately this part probably has benevolent reasons for doing what it's doing?
Kind of. It was really hard, right? Because I could see how badly it was hurting Mabel. And so it was hard to have compassion for a part of me that was hurting somebody I loved, right? So eventually I was able to get there. Like, I think I had an underlying tone of like, I like, logically and analytically I understand why this is happening, right? And it's like, how do I love this part and say, I get that you're trying to keep me safe and the other part safe and Mabel safe in a way, right? To get away, the intensity was, we got to get away from her because we don't want to hurt her because we're so dysregulated from what's happening, right? So I could understand why it was happening, but it was a little harder to get to like, I love this part of myself, right? I think I'm there now, but I think I had to go through this whole spiraling out because it was really bad. It was really, really bad. Not just that part coming forward, but all of the betrayal and the deception. Like, it threw my entire system into the dark. And I couldn't show up for anybody else. It was like survival. And I'm just now on the upswing of coming out of that. And that was really from like December to like end of March.
I love this conversation so much because it's so real. And I think people don't really sometimes understand all of the work that goes into things like system responsibility. I was thinking while you've been talking, all of the different skill sets that you pulled in order to make system accountability work, right? Like you didn't name them, but basically you gave examples of like stabilization and safety, grounding type, orienting type skills, organizing the littles so they're not necessarily coming out in times that it's not beneficial for them to be out. It's not beneficial for the people that you're with for them to be out, which means having some idea of what your internal world landscape looks like and what those littles can be doing and who might be able to be with them potentially, which then means you had to do a significant amount of work on, some people call it system mapping, other people just call it getting to know like who their alters are, who their different headmates are, what their roles are, what their strong points are, who's closer to who's a helper, who's a protector, getting to know all of that. And then figuring out like, how do we best communicate? Do we communicate on paper? Do we communicate? You had mentioned like some imagery in the headspace of being able to have conversations in there. And I'm just kind of rattling these all off as they kind of occurred to me while you were talking to help the people who are engaged in this journey see that it is multi-layered, complicated, and it's not something that happens quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Even when you have all of that information, right? You just said it took a few months to get to a better
Mm-hmm.
place, and you're somebody with a pretty impressive skill set and pretty good knowledge of your system.
Mm-hmm.
So it's okay to be frustrated. It's okay for it to take a lot of time. And that's also going out to all the therapists that might be listening who want their clients to be able to just get this stuff like that.
Yeah. And I mean, you know me and my system and how much work, we've been on the healing trauma journey since 2012. I've done, I think, 6 or 7 healing intensives now, every therapy under the sun. And I was actually shocked by, right? Like this new part that I had never met, come forward. And it was really scary. It was scary for me. It was scary for my partner. And I'm still, in terms of that system responsibility and accountability, still repairing the hurt done and being able to, and it's not easy because I'm sort of an avoidant when it comes to emotions, which I'm sure doesn't surprise you. Like, it's so interesting because as a therapist, I was so different. And I think because the boundaries are different there. But when it's somebody you're so close with, like it's hard to have those loving conversations and really hold space for the pain that was caused by that other part. And I want to just run, not run away from from her, but I just want to kind of run away from the intense feelings of sadness that it brings up. Because that's just not me. And one thing that I've really held on to was Katie Quiche had said, in an Instagram live that I did with her about like some parts will disconnect from the heart. That doesn't mean that they're sociopathic. It doesn't mean that they're bad. They just have a moment or however long where they disconnect from the heart. And when I look at it that way, I'm like, this other part of me that showed up that I didn't know was so far disconnected from my heart. It wasn't in line with my integrity, my morals, my values, my loving heart that I have. And so that was what was scary. Right. But that's what I'm talking about. Like, I understand there's all this stigma in the world about DID and we're violent and dangerous and all those things. I wish we could talk about the real life challenging aspects of like, yes, parts do show up and they can get gnarly. It doesn't mean they're going to kill somebody, for God's sakes.
Right.
And so I think people aren't having the harder conversations around the really tough aspects of DID with the switching and the parts that show up that, don't know the current life and, the body and the people and the pets and all the things. I mean, it's overwhelming and we do need compassion. And it's hard to have compassion for those parts that are being assholes.
In the present day, right.
Yeah.
But when you think about it logically, it would make sense that we would have parts that would disconnect from the heart. How else do you survive so much of the trauma that
Right.
the vast majority of us have been through?
Yeah.
Right. Like, I don't know that you can survive all that stuff and be connected.
No. No.
And
Yeah.
if there's a part that's not oriented to the present day, present life, present circumstances, and thinks that that's going to happen again, it makes sense.
Yeah. And what I really learned, because now that I'm in the reflective stage of it, and thinking about like, what is it that, can create that intensity? It's safety and stabilization. And I've been so displaced, since December. I'm just on the upswing where I'm looking to close on my first investment property and like have a home. But I have not had a home since I left on December 26th. That's been hard on my parts, and it was really about like, we have to get roots somewhere and we have to establish safety in order even for us to fully lean into this relationship. We have to rebuild entirely what we knew because we're not going back to what was not right for us. We have to create a new foundation. I think you and I were talking privately, and it's about that Maslow hierarchy of needs. And that bottom layer was pulled out from under me. And so that's why it was creating so much terror. And so when the nervous system itself is in terror, anybody's going to act, out of fear. And for those of us with DID, it brought forward a part that I had no idea even existed.
Which is also an important thing for people to be aware of, right? Just because you've mapped out your system and you know your parts, it doesn't necessarily mean that you know all of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I've had some fusions since all this too, which some have been very challenging, some have been gentle, some have been like, "Ooh, this is interesting," right? And we're not having those conversations either. And, actually Blaine Grace recently fused, and the loss of that part, like I didn't even want to talk about it. It was like so sacred to me. And I'm like, what is happening? It was a different fusion than the Nancy fusion. But Blaine really needed to go because her purpose was to protect, and she wasn't the part that was showing up. But she's the one who kept me safe in my marriage for as long as she did. And she had been trying to get me out of there for a really long time, and I wasn't listening. I just thought it was Blaine acting up and all the things. But she was no longer, she was like, basically, like, we had this conversation. She's like, you don't need me anymore. Like, you're good. And like, it was this beautiful, gentle process. And I'm still so thankful to Annalyn McCord for opening up about when one of her parts became suicidal. And then there was this fusion that happened, and she called her doctor freaking out about how she was losing this part of her. And there was all of this grief, and she begged her not to go. And thank God I heard that conversation, because when I had the Nancy fusion and the Blaine fusion, it was a lot easier for me to understand what was happening because somebody else had shared their experience.
That's the best part of being able to do something like this podcast with you, or people who are writing blogs, is sharing experience, because it's not easy to get that information.
No.
And it is really helpful when you find yourself faced with something similar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And also,
Yeah.
I'm just going to call it out, right? Too, when a system experiences a fusion and you are in relationships with other people who have relationships with your parts, they also grieve the sort of like loss of the part that fuses, even though like you might be able to feel parts of that or aspects of that part still within you. Like a lot of people will say, right? Like, no, that's still here. It's just different. But for those outside people, it is a loss.
It's totally a loss. And my ex and I had recorded a beautiful podcast on the Nancy fusion. And he opened up, and he was vulnerable, and he had tears, and he really said, and I don't feel comfortable releasing it now that we're divorced. We have our own stuff, and things have changed there in that dynamic, and I don't feel comfortable doing that. But he had talked about losing the love of his life, and Nancy is the one who married him, and he held Nancy during that fusion, and it was rough.
The emotion that's coming up in me just hearing about it, it sounds really intense. I think about a few episodes back, the Gianu system and their husband Jonathan was on, and they, as you know, they recently went through a fusion as well. And so Jonathan was able to talk a little bit about the loss that he was feeling. He can, sort of see still some of them around, but it's different.
Mm-hmm.
It's very different.
It's totally different. And I think a lot of people are having a hard time with me not really identifying as Dr. Fletcher anymore. It really was, Nancy was the face of Dr. Fletcher. And I cannot get people to understand that. And it's so painful.
Yeah. And what people can't see is like you've been fighting tears since you started talking about the fusion of Nancy. And it makes so much sense. She was such a central part of your systems living in the world in the present day, right? The person that married your husband, the person that was Dr. Fletcher.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it is really hard. It's especially hard for people who are not systems to wrap their head around the fact that something that was there that they associate with your physical appearance, let's say, is no longer there.
Yeah.
Well, it must be in there somewhere. Well, actually, not necessarily.
It's really not. And a lot of the research says that like a lot of the skills and stuff come back. Like, sure, I have all this education in psychology, but honestly, trying to hold a conversation right now around psychology related things, I have no interest. None. It's like this other world that existed that I just am not in anymore. And that I actually don't even want to be in. Like, nothing about it resonates.
And it's so important to honor that, right?
Yeah, I have to. Like, it was a really hard loss. The Blaine one was more like, I mean, Nancy fusing changed my entire life. And she had been integrating for a while, right? But I mean, it meant closing my practice. It meant leaving the field of psychology. It meant getting a divorce. It meant being a lesbian. I mean, all of these things. Yeah, and it was wild, and it's hard for people to understand that that's really not me. And then with Blaine, my one of my good friends of over like 20 years, she goes, what, she actually asked this question kind of that you're bringing up, and she said, what do people in your life do that are having a hard time with the loss? She's like, Blaine was like my best friend. And I was like, honestly, I don't know what to, like, we're still really good friends, but it is different. And I said, I don't know. Like, I honor and I have compassion and empathy for the loss of that. I still want to be in your life. Like, we're still good friends. That's not going to change. And I had another person tell me, another person that lives with DID that was saying some of their parts were really struggling with the loss of Blaine. And I was like, I totally get it. Like I loved Blaine more than anything. Like, and she her aspects are in there, but um Blaine was a fighter and a protector. She was the one who wanted to do, front lines of child trafficking stuff. And even that, I have no interest. None.
Makes sense, right? It exited along with Blaine.
Yep. That was her thing, fierce protector of women and children. And it's not that I don't care about women and children, but it's different. Like Blaine was like, I will fight you, like, granted, she would never actually fight somebody, but, she's just very, very protective of women and children. And I care about women and children and I'm protective, but not in the way that Blaine was. I mean, it was like very helicoptery and fierce and didn't give a fuck,
Yeah, she was badass.
Yeah.
For sure. These are the things that people don't really understand or think or know about. And I feel like sometimes there's this expectation that we somehow have control over all of these parts. And it's not,
Yeah. It's hard. I forget I have DID sometimes, and I forget Mabel has DID. There's sometimes we're interacting and we forget.
yeah.
Or she'll have told me something and I'm like, did you tell me that? And obviously I love her and I trust her. And so I'm like, shit, I don't want to miss things that my partner is trying to tell me, and sometimes we forget because I mean we live, I think, pretty good lives and we do our thing. And when we're in flow, we're in flow. But then if the parts are spinning out, we're like, oh shit, like our parts have something going on and we don't know what it is yet. And we got to figure it out.
Which circles back down right to that system responsibility where we started. Stuff starts getting stirred up, don't understand what it is, regroup, go inside and figure it out, talk.
Yeah. This is, and it's hard, it's also hard to have like system compassion with that responsibility, kind of like what you were talking about earlier. Like, and that radical acceptance piece, which sometimes people ask me like how I got there. I have no idea. It was just like years of dedication to the healing journey. And then having Larry Rule as like a mentor of this, like the work is ongoing. It never ends. You just have to stay committed. Like if you want to stay alive, you got to stay committed no matter how hard it gets. You don't victim posture, you take accountability, you watch your substance use, like, like you got to do all those things. And eventually, if you just accept that it's going to be a lot of work, but you keep trying, it's easier to have the system compassion.
What's the alternative? I mean, really, right? Yeah, exactly. So, like,
Death.
there are plenty of people who will say, that sounds terrible. I don't want to do that. I don't want to have to put that much work into daily life. Plenty of conversations about the fact that it kind of sucks if there are a couple of parts or one part that's the work part. And when they are done working for the day, they don't get to relax because other parts of the system need their time.
Yeah.
And if you don't give them their time, your whole entire life is going to spin out in chaos.
Yep.
So it might mean that maybe, if you happen to be the work part in your system, you might not be getting time. Your time might be really limited, but what's the alternative, right? The alternative is you're not able to work because your parts are spinning out all over the place, or maybe you're in and out of the hospital, you're in and out of like I don't know, like more difficulties with functioning, I guess I want to say.
Yep.
Or you get to that place that you're describing, which is,
yeah,
if I want my life to work, these are the things I need to do.
Yeah. It's a balance between like you can acknowledge, what does Brene Brown always say? Embrace the suck.
Yes.
But don't get stuck in the victim posture. And it's not a great quality of me. I get it from my mother. I know I do. I can be very tough love sometimes with my parts and other people. And I understand that is not the best approach, but it is one that I sometimes works when I start going down the like, poor me, I can't believe this is happening. And just like when I went to go do that intensive this past spring, I was like, if I don't do something, I'm going to be one of those people that goes through a divorce and gets stuck in their anger and like just hates on everybody. And I don't want that. I can be appropriately angry and heal from a betrayal while also healing and leaning into joy in my new life and all these things. But I had to dive in and do that deeper work. And I know not everybody has the resources to do all of that, but there are still things you can do at home, alternative healing practices, working with your parts at home, listening to podcasts, reading books, taking tools from here or there to help you, because no one's coming to save you.
Amen.
No therapist, no partner, no parent, no friend. You are responsible for creating the life that you need. And you have to ask for help. Like even going through this time, one of my really good friends said, Adrienne, while you're going through this divorce, my one piece of advice to you is this. And I said, what's that? She goes, do not be afraid to ask for help. Let people help you right now. Let people offer you a place to stay. Let people take you out for dinner and coffee. Let people help you pack, move your stuff, take phone calls from you. You have plenty of people in your support system that want to help you. Let us help you. And I have let people help me. And by golly, thank God I did, because I'm in a much better spot with all of the, I have like a soul family and good friends and colleagues who care, and, and everybody can offer a little bit of something different. And I'm used to not accepting help from anybody and being fiercely independent. And that has only served me so far. It served me really well in my career and business, but it has not served me well relationally.
Oh, that's a whole minefield all by itself. Like it's so hard to have relationships, I think, when you have DID, and maybe that's just unique to our system. But when I reflect back on what relationships look like, there are so many protective parts that it makes close relationships really challenging, and accepting help is really hard because it means you're vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And historically, when you come out of horrific abuse, vulnerability is not where you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
But close relationships, I think by default, require some level of vulnerability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like one of the first people that I stayed with, it was a friend that a relatively newer friend, but somebody that I do trust that could see the switching and talk to the different parts. And she would say, it's really interesting because when I talk to the teenager, this is what is said. When I talk to the adult, this is what is said. And she goes, I can see why, this and that. And, but just really loving and compassionate. And then I started to feel really seen. Right. And I wanted to run. But we had those conversations because it takes a lot for me to stay somewhere else, and let people just witness whatever. Because, parts come, I always say parts come out after 7. Obviously, they come out more than that. But, it was kind of like they were used to that with the practice, right? So, like after 7 p.m. was like, parts free for all, whatever, to create that time and space. And so it is different. Like you get the adult logical businesswoman me during the day half the time, and at night you get, a teenage part that just is like doesn't think much is a big deal. But then you got some other scared little kid parts that are like, are we going to make it? Are we going to be okay? Are we going to have a house again? I mean, it's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot because attending to all of those parts isn't easy.
No.
And depending on how your system is set up, I know some systems have sort of like a hierarchy in their system where they have like caretakers who will automatically step up and then tend to those parts, but not every system is built like that, right? Like there are
No.
some systems that are more kind of like flatline where everybody's sort of equal, and then it's really hard to figure that stuff out. That's hard anyway. Who am I kidding?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Well, just last night I was talking to a friend because I've had a lot of like very serious adult responsibilities right now. So my littles haven't gotten much time. They get a little bit of time with like my dog or whatever. And my friend was saying to me, she goes, yeah, she's like, you got to create time for those little ones. She's like, they must be like just really needing to have some fun right now because you've been in such like a serious mode, like trying to lay this new foundation and do all these new things. They're like, they're hanging out, they're being, I didn't want to say good because I don't like the good and bad, but they're being like they get it, I think. But I do need to create some time and space. And so I was thinking, oh, maybe I could take them to paint pottery or, go do something that's like a kids related activity for some relaxation and ease. So they know like I haven't forgotten about them. It's just that I have a lot of adult stuff I got to do right now. And that would be for anybody, right? People that don't live with parts, but like
Yeah.
doing that inner child work and embracing and doing some more fun, relaxed things, because that's just overall good quality stress management.
And that also is an opportunity to strengthen internal communication, right? Being able to ask parts to be patient, explaining what's going on in case they maybe don't understand what's happening.
Yeah.
Just to say, here's why it's different. This is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. And this is what I need from you right now. And on the backside of that, I promise that I will do X, Y, and Z for you and follow through with it.
Yeah. And I was also wondering too, I was thinking about this concept of change and transformation because every time I've gone through some kind of a fusion, everything starts to change on the outside. My clothes, what I like to eat, all based on whatever parts are kind of coming forward more or whatever's happening. And there's a lot of grief and loss that happens for the people around you and for your system. And I sometimes wonder if people choose not to embrace the changes because of the expectations around them. Like I've had to be willing to face all kinds of things. I'm going to lose friends. I'm going to lose people, places, and things, right? Kind of like when you're recovering from an addiction, they tell you to change communities, right? People, places, and things to help you stay sober and healthy and all of that. Well, you can't help but face change when you have an identity fusion. Like, certain friends don't align anymore. Certain things that maybe that part was involved in might not be aligned with your soul. It might not be healthy. What you thought was healthy might not be, and then people who, when you're in the public eye, people have an expectation of who you are as a public figure, or what you should and shouldn't be saying, or what are you like as a doctor? You should and shouldn't be doing that. I mean, it's been a lot of like, okay, I'm going to have to face that not everybody's going to approve of the new me. Not everybody's going to like me, and that's okay. People think I'm absolutely nuts for closing a practice and going into business, finance, and investing instead of staying with psychology. And it's like, but it's not me anymore. So I think it's about being able to face the fact that there's going to be a lot of grief and loss in any change and transformation. And you got to have a good support system to help you navigate that. And you got to stay anchored and rooted in your parts and showing up for them, or else you just get eaten alive. And there's a lot of dark sides to advocacy, and that could probably be a whole nother podcast, but it has not been an easy role to be in. And even with that, I'm like, I am designing a new life that is peaceful and calm and not chaotic. And I don't think advocacy is going to further my peace, calm, and overall health and well-being. I've done it for 4 years now. Other parts felt really positive about it. It was really hard to do, and that's not bringing me peace anymore.
There's such a beautiful theme to what you're talking about, though, which is remembering that y'all are living your life for you.
Yeah.
Not other people. So, other people are upset and think you're crazy for closing your practice. Well, they're not living your life. You are. You're the person that gets out of your bed in the morning with all of your parts and goes through your day together. And so, what works for you, that's what's important, not what the person down the street thinks.
Right.
Is that, what is it? Eleanor Roosevelt, I think, was the one that said, what other people think of me is none of my business.
Yeah.
And when we can ground in that, it works so much better, because then we can figure out what's working for me and the system that I'm part of. Because if it's not working for me and the system that I'm part of, it ain't going to work at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Like, we can put together a facade to live
Mm-hmm.
for other people, but that just feels really hollow and empty.
Yeah.
And one thing that you've been really consistent in all along, you've always said, I'm going to live my life authentically. I'm going to bring love and light to the world. And you've been really true to that, regardless of what's going on in your personal life.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, I've had parts that want to do other things differently, right? Like, they want to sometimes go off the rails. And I'm like, remember what we were taught. You get angry, you get upset, you work through it, and then you put more love and light back into the world. That doesn't mean you don't show whatever it is, an empowering quote, you share an angry song. I'm fine with all of that, because all parts need to be able to express their hurt and pain in a healthy way. And for some of my parts that don't have words, music is one way that they do that. But I have really tried. I've been really, really hurt the last couple of years, and I have not thrown any single person under the bus. I try my hardest to even talk about the people who have hurt me with integrity. And in this last situation in my intensive, I was able to get to forgiveness and gratitude for what I just walked through from December to March, and with a lot of compassion for other people who have hurt me. And I was like, holy shit. Right. And I'm not one that thinks you need to forgive for healing. I'm really not, because I don't know that I'll ever be able to forgive my father for what he did to me. Right. But like, to do the deeper work to get underneath the pain is so important. But I also think it's important to share the pain and anger while you're going through it, or else, like you just said, you're giving people this assumption that, like, you're going through all this, but you're not hurting and you're not angry, and don't you. So I think it's a balance between showing up with integrity, but also being human and messy.
Yes. And it's easy to default back into just living from the neck up, right? And not kind of like dipping down into those feeling states because they feel dangerous.
Right.
Historically, it's never been safe to have a feeling unless it was a positive looking one, for most people anyway.
Right.
So it's this whole foreign concept of going through life with your parts and actually feeling what you're feeling when you're feeling it, and sharing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the situation that I was just in, it could have killed me.
Yep.
It really could have killed me. There was some underlying suicidal ideation for some parts. There was a desire to go back to old behaviors that could have been really harmful and dangerous to me in the parts. And it was a lot of work to stay out of that shit. A lot of work.
And this is the stuff that people don't see, right? So the people who are judging are the people that don't know that this is what's going on under the surface behind closed doors. It's a reminder to extend grace to everybody.
Right. Yeah. You don't know, and you can't base what somebody says off of social media, a couple of sentences. You don't know their whole life story, whether that's an article, this, that, and the other thing, or what people try, I think, to put out reality, but there's also a level of privacy and integrity that also needs to be, upheld as well.
I have been for decades amazed at the assumptions that other people make about how much they think they know based on reading an article, a book, an interview that they've seen. It's like, y'all are reading stuff that's edited.
Uh-huh.
You are reading things that are filtered. You don't have 100% of the information, so stop assuming that you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been really painful, and again, when I talk about system responsibility and accountability, part of that is also like leaning into support system, but also letting them know, like, hey, this is what happens when my system feels like this, right? And like, this is what I do. So it's not like a personal thing. Like, if I'm staying with you and you see me disappear for a while, I'm probably tending to the parts or like doing an activity that they need to do right now, and or I have some parts that are shy and they just don't want to talk, so I might be invited to a social gathering. Maybe I can stay for a little bit, maybe I can't, maybe there's a last minute change. I am the queen of pivots because I listen to my parts. I intuitively check out with them, where are they in alignment, where are they not, what feels right collectively. And I'm having to pivot all the time, and people look at me and go, I thought you were going to do this, now you're doing that. And I'm like, yeah, because if I don't have system agreement, it is a nightmare for me. I went to a wedding. I can't remember if was it last July or the July before? Maybe it was 2 Julys ago now. And I did not have system agreement, and it was a nightmare for me. It's a mess. And so sometimes I have to cancel, or I have to change things or pivot things because my emotional safety at this point in my recovery is far more important to me than anything else. The parts and I have to come first before we're able to show up for friends, even show up for a partner, which is really hard because I would lay on the train tracks for Mabel in a heartbeat if she were ever in trouble. Like, I just would. That is how much I love this woman. Right. But I still have to put the parts and I first so I can show up for her. And when I don't, I'm more messy in the dynamic.
That's the thing that people who are not systems really struggle with, because in their minds, right, when they're in situations, they think, well, I can just, I don't know, suck it up and power through. And maybe they can. Great. But when you're a system, it's not that simple. You can't necessarily just suck it up and power through, because there's fallout that can be really chaotic and really damaging and really not worth it. So sometimes you can appear to be one of the most social people on the planet. And other times, one of the phrases that I often use is boycotting human interaction right now. Like, it's just can't do it. Sorry.
Yeah.
And that's because there are parts that have specific needs. And sometimes I don't even understand what those needs are. I just know that they need to not be interacting with a lot of people or certain types of personalities at different times. And respecting that is way better than trying to just force it, because backlash is really bad.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what Nancy did. She pushed through and powered through for everything until she couldn't, until she literally, metaphorically, figuratively died. And if I didn't have an awareness, because that was a very dangerous fusion, I could have ended up in the hospital after a suicide attempt.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I read about stuff in the literature, because it's not that I'm totally opposed to the research, I just don't like the verbiage and how we're talked about sometimes. And like, you cannot capture this reality in a fucking textbook or any goddamn DID study. They're not talking about these things. They use whatever the norms and the phrases and these classification things. And I'm like, I can't open a book and feel like I know how to walk through this fusion. The way you're making it sounds like nothing I'm experiencing.
Well, clinical lingo is really bold by default, and typically it's pathologizing by default, which seems to always shed either a negative light or a judgment on the person going through it. And it's Mel's was recently on the last episode that we did, and they were talking a lot about how what's written in textbooks doesn't sound like what you experience.
No.
and the importance of finding community so that you can see some of your experiences reflected in other people. Like, oh, okay, this is what it is. If you're part of a system, this is how it works, even though every system is
Right.
going to be unique.
Hmm. Well, yeah, and I always say this recently now, like I thought I really understood DID. I've treated it, I live with it. I think my mom pretty much had it. And now I'm in relationship with it. I don't have a fucking clue.
Yeah.
I don't have a fucking clue. What I thought I knew, I don't know. And so I'm just here for it. I'm here to learn. I'm continuously learning. There's no way. Sure, could I help therapists be better therapists to their DID clients? Sure. I think I can do that. Right. But in terms of like still getting to know aspects of me, aspects of my partner, and walking life together, I'm like, I am here for this ride because I don't know shit.
I think you summed it up really well, though, when you were talking about being a mentee of Larry Rules and just kind of talking about all the things you need to do to maintain functioning in daily life or to maintain a life that works, however we want to phrase that. It doesn't matter. But, not victim posturing, you're in for the long haul, paying attention to the things that keep you okay,
Yeah.
having that system, communication, collaboration, accountability, responsibility. Parts don't get to go rogue without consequences.
Right. Yeah.
And it's a lot of people don't want to hear this. Some people do, but a lot of people don't want to hear that this is a long haul way of living in the world. It's not,
Yeah.
oh, you're going to cross this finish line and you're cured. You look back and go, wow, that was my former life. And I don't look anything like that anymore. It's a whole unfolding process.
Yeah, and it continues to unfold, and I feel, and every time you work through something, I feel like if you're stay committed, like the trajectory is always moving upward. You can't ever really go all the way back because you have different awareness, insights, tools, resources, whatever. So you might feel like you've taken a massive step back, but you're actually that trajectory, that growth process, you are moving forward, but you got to stay with it. You got to hang in there, or else I'm sorry to keep it real, but like you will end up dead or with some kind of addiction or in very dangerous situations. So it's like you gotta, and it can't be the excuse of like I don't have the resources, because there are far so many free resources right now to help. And I understand, yes, of course, getting to the actual trauma memories, that can be very expensive, and accessing those resources. I'm not in a disagreement with that piece, but in terms of like not playing the victim card, working on recovery in whatever way that's going to look like for you, whatever it's free 12 step groups, podcasts, listening to other shared experiences, submitting scholarship applications to get tickets for a conference. Like you got to be willing to do it, and I think, with my mom being a survivor herself and having to raise three kids on her own with very limited help. I don't think she got child support from either one of our fathers. And it wasn't an option not to move forward, because if she didn't move forward, she couldn't take care of her kids. And she wasn't, I don't mean to glorify my mom. We have a different relationship now that she's dead. She's safe now because she's dead. But I did take away some valuable insights from her, which was like, no one's going to save you. You've got to figure out how to do the work. You want something, you got to get out there and you got to work for it. And she didn't just mean like financially. She meant like, don't let anyone overtake you. You're the only one who can create your life, and you've got to figure it out. And I'm with all of the shit that I've been through in my life, like I hang on to my mom as a resource because I won't give up because of her own tenacity. And I want to create a better life for what's after me.
You all have always been really good about pointing out that healing isn't always just what happens in individual and group therapy rooms, right? Like you've talked about things that you've done with horses, with body work, with breath work, with yoga, with smash rooms, there's conferences and books and journals and writing. And you've brought in throughout time so many different modalities of healing. And the point that you're making right now is such an important one, because there are a lot of people that feel like they're stymied because they can't get into a therapist's office or a therapist who understands and knows DID. But there are examples of people who have healed in spite of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, even just being willing to open up to a new person, like connection and community, and the support system I have now is not the same support system I had when I started this journey. Right. And being able to say yes to dinner when a friend invites you over, and just increasing that window of tolerance of vulnerability.
Yep.
The person that I'm staying with right now while I'm waiting to close on a property has been in my life since 2012, and she's witnessed a lot of the journey. but it's not like we were like best friends overnight. She's a soul sister. We put in, work to the relationship. I consider her a wise advisor. And I said, I feel like I'm not able to offer you as much as you offer me. And she goes, oh my God, I learn stuff from you all the time. She's like, I consider you my wise advisor. Like, it's not a parenting relationship. We have this soul sistership, and there's just a lot of wisdom there. I love to learn from other people, no matter who it is. It doesn't have to be a doctor.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And there's so much wisdom in somebody's life experience, especially the folks that are willing to reflect and share.
Yeah. Yeah. And nature has been really big for me in the parts. When I'm spinning out and I can't get clear on what to do, or I can't connect with the parts, or I don't know what's happening for them, for some reason, the nervous system and the body respond well to being in nature.
I'm with you on that one. Doesn't matter what's happening, being in the woods, on a mountain, on a lake, or on the beach, any of those places, my entire soul is just called to it.
Yeah, I think it's like a spiritual thing for me. It's like a connection to the divine. And I know everybody has different beliefs, but for me, that's where I feel like I get clarity. I can breathe better. And sometimes I have to bring AirPods, and I like nature sounds, but sometimes I have other parts that are like, we're going to go for this forest walk. Then I want to blast my headphones. And then I have to check in with my sister, who's an audiologist, make sure I'm not blowing out my eardrums. But yeah, I mean, recovery is a lot of work, and there's a lot of judgment that's going to happen. If you share your experience, especially publicly, you have to be ready for that. But you also have to
Yeah.
know when to say no, and protect your peace and protect your energy, and you do you. And there are moments I'm really self-confident and I don't let things get to me. And then there are other times my younger parts are triggered as fuck and I have to take a massive step back.
Yep. Being true to yourself is the key to just about everything. Listen,
Yeah.
follow that internal guidance, work together with your parts, don't give up.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of us, and I think this is our culture, is where we, without even realizing it, give our power away to the situation, to a provider. Like the therapists I work with were not specialists in DID. And there were times that really bothered me. And then other times I was like, okay, this is who I have to work with right now. They're not awful, right? They're trying, they're human. And there's some things there that I, wasn't a fan of, but at the end of the day, it was me and the parts who had to say, okay, what can we take away from this session? What was helpful? What wasn't? Stop trying to get this person to understand every aspect of what we're experiencing, and take the tool, give it a try,
Yeah.
and come back to the drawing board. And there are, therapists who can admit that they don't know everything. I have more respect for them. The ones who would look at me and like, when you can just read people, whether they're tired or they don't know something, but they're like fluffing you up the ass, you're like, yeah, no, like you've got to be real and authentic with me, or the parts are just going to walk all over you because they're not going to respect you if you don't tell them the truth.
If there's a therapist who can be open, willing to learn, honest, compassionate, non-judgmental, probably in pretty good hands. They're not going to be perfect.
Yeah. And you've also got to take system responsibility when a part does or says something to a therapist that's not so nice. I had a part years ago. This is such a dickhead move that one of the parts did. They found one of those jars, those porcelain jars that you can put like money in, and it said mistakes, and they ordered that and sent it to a former therapist of mine. Luckily, she had a good laugh because she had a very dark and twisted sense of humor that probably helped some of my parts over time. But, I had to take accountability for that. And that was fucking hard because that's, again, not something I would do. That's not aligned with my values and my heart. Because, right, that's a passive aggressive fuck you.
I know, but it's really kind of funny. When I think about it, it feels like some type of like younger adolescent part, which is just so like, 13,
Yeah.
14-ish. Yeah. Who
Teenager.
are just, let me
Yeah.
just like stab that and twist it a little bit. And
Yeah.
as a therapist, I
Yeah.
feel like if I got that, I would also laugh. Like, touche, good one.
Yeah. And I'm not proud of it. And we had to work through it and take system accountability and responsibility. When somebody hurts your feelings, you need to
Yeah.
use I statements. You need to let them know, right? You do all the coaching, but you got to take responsibility for that shit, or else you're not going to get better.
And that it's hard because there are definitely things that come up. I mean, I think, things that can get said or just behaviorally, and by behaviorally, I don't mean necessarily overt behaviors at this point, but sometimes just demeanors that different parts can take on that just don't feel very kind. Or sometimes I'm about to piss off about 4 of my own parts when I say not very mature. And you stepping up and being like, yeah, I'm accountable for that and we'll do better. So clearly there's a piece of internal communication and cooperation that needs to be worked on a little differently so that can hopefully be prevented in the future. It happened. I'm sorry. Moving forward.
Yeah, and a lot of the times it's not even actually the outside trigger or the person. It's like sometime like right with that teenage part that sent the mistakes jar also wasn't feeling heard by me. Right? That behavior could have been stopped if I maybe took the time to say, I hear that you're really upset. Okay, let's write an email and maybe expressing how you feel about this instead of sending a jar. And what are you really upset and angry about? Is it really about what she did or didn't do? Or is it about something I did or didn't do?
This just like came flying into my head, which is we probably should mention the fact that, yes, it is true, like nobody's coming, right? We have to be there for ourselves. And you might need to grieve that
Yeah, yeah,
because you're probably not somebody that ever had someone who was supposed to be there back at a time when they really were supposed to be there.
yeah,
And they're not going to be there now.
yeah,
That time has passed. We have to be there for ourselves. And there is grief involved in that. Like a therapist isn't going to fix it.
yeah. There is.
Nobody's going to fix you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I think it's about like it's like a couple of things, right? Like we could blame other people. Sure, other people do shitty things, and there's usually a trigger. And then based on the trigger, it's sometimes the present day, but oftentimes it can be traced back to something earlier, right? So even the stuff I just walked through from December to March, was it really all about the actual divorce and things that he did? Or was it so much deeper under that that made it a lot more painful and complicated for the parts?
Yeah.
Right? So I could stay in anger and blame my ex for absolutely every mistake he made. But I also know I have also made several mistakes in that marriage. You don't get married with the plans to get divorced. Two people contribute to the dysfunction. And I know that's hard for people to hear, even when there's elements of abuse. I'm not saying you're responsible for any abuse that's happening, but we all share in the dynamics with people. Right. And so it's about a willingness to not stay in the blaming and to look at where can you empower yourself? Where do you need to take accountability? What boundaries do you need to have? And it's exhausting and a lot of work. So yeah, it's easier to blame and stay stuck, but that'll kill you or end you up with some kind of really fucked up addiction.
And it gets old. It sucks to be stuck.
Yeah. Because at some point what does the universe always say that keeps delivering messages to you until you've learned them?
Till you learn the lesson, you'll keep getting the same one handed to you.
Yeah. And I don't want to learn. I've learned so many fucking hard lessons the hard way. I don't want to learn any more that way. Like, you know?
Yeah. For people, I have parts that are very, very into metaphysical, new age, spirituality, etc. Have been for many, many, many years. And I have an old friend that wrote a book on soul contracts, and we used to joke like, God, my soul took on one hell of a contract in this lifetime.
Seriously, right?
Oh, a little ambitious there.
Yeah.
It that came up in a conversation actually this past Friday where somebody was talking about the number of things that my life sometimes feels like one of those, those electric pitchers that's like an overdrive that just keeps like throwing balls at you.
Yeah.
And she had said something like, I don't know, you always seem like you have energy and that you're in good spirits. And I'm sort of like, I'm not always in good spirits, but what's the alternative?
Right.
What's the alternative? Right? It is what it is. Have to figure out how to navigate it. Or what? Or I sit and I stuck and say it's not fair. Like that's to me, I don't want to sit in it's not fair energy.
Yeah. Yeah. I have moments of that. I'll let the parts have a pity party and I'll say, you can have a pity party. You can be upset. You can have a little tantrum that's not going to hurt anybody. Whatever you need to do, you can have your little pity party. Have some fucking popcorn. Get whatever those little streamer things are. I don't care what you have to do, but you're not going to stay there. So have your little poor me. My life fucking sucks. I can't believe this is fucking happening to me. And then we're going to get back on track with our recovery. I just don't let them stay there very long.
It's a good strategy though, right? So because that actually allows people to feel whatever it is that they need to feel in those moments. And if you're watching to say like, okay, time to move forward.
Yeah. So it's a lot of work, but it's worth it, you know? And I think too, like when you're really devoted to your recovery, you are going to experience integrations and fusions, and those can be overwhelming. You just have to know that it's part of the process. But if you avoid it, it's likely going to happen at some point anyway.
That's been my observation, even watching people that are willing to share their process, that people who actually were, I would say, against the concept of fusion have experienced it. It's just what happens as part of the process.
Yeah. In the beginning, it was hard for me to wrap my mind around full fusion, like no longer being multiple at all. And I still don't know
Right.
that I can see that piece yet for me. But that was the only piece I really had. I'm like, how do I go from multiple to being one? Like I just don't feel like I can see that. Like there's too many layers here, too many parts. Like, but now that I've had a few, I'm like, maybe it happens when I'm 90, maybe it doesn't. It doesn't matter. I'm fine being multiple. But the more I've surrendered to, okay, I might lose some of these parts of me, and that's okay. Maybe I can compassionately walk through it. Maybe I can put some safety things in place, right? Especially with the suicidal stuff, because what in my experience, when I've had suicidal parts and then they fuse, right? But I think that's where it gets dangerous for DID on the outside, is a part can commit suicide when the other ones don't want to die.
Yes.
So it's holding space while that part is like literally dying. The way I've described it is like it felt like the level of loss when I lost my mom.
Yeah.
Incredibly painful. And also, thank God Mabel was in my life at the time of the Nancy fusion, because there was a ritual abuse stuff coming up. Trigger warning, sorry, I should have said that ahead of time. And parts were shutting down and not saying anything, and it was getting dangerous. And she's like, can you try to tell me what this other part is saying? And it helped diffuse the situation, or else I don't know. And so you've got to be open to, like, the more you work on stuff, it can spiral out for a little bit. You got to know when to breathe, take a step back, put safety things in place. It's a lot. And I think therapists really don't get that piece very well, because they don't understand, how can one part be suicidal but all the rest of them are, and how do we know when to intervene? And I don't mean cops, police, and hospital and all that. If necessary, I get it, but there can be a whole different way to walk through people.
I agree. It goes back to this concept of, everyone has this innate wisdom. Can we get in touch with the innate internal wisdom and follow that? And that includes, as part of the therapeutic relationship, that therapy is not a conveyor belt of interventions. It's a relationship. The relationship's the vehicle for healing. And can we be authentic in that? With all those things that you've
Yeah.
already mentioned, like, right, like the therapist isn't going to come and fix you. And we're still responsible for showing up authentically and communicating and being willing to take risks and be vulnerable, which is really, that might take a while. As somebody who's an abuse survivor, I
Yeah.
certainly, my system's extremely guarded with multiple layers of programming, and
Same.
you think you've broken through one layer, and then here's another layer of programming that's designed to remain guarded and protective.
Yeah.
But you keep going, right?
Yep.
Like that's not where
Yeah.
you stop. You don't go like, oh shit, there's another layer. I quit. Because then what?
Yeah. Yeah. And I had a former mentor of mine say, it's okay to quit for like a day, two, sometimes even a week. Not quit as in like hurt yourself, but like quit as in like, I just don't fucking want to
Yep.
do recovery today or tomorrow. But then you get back on track. Sometimes you can quit temporarily and then you get back on track.
Yeah. And totally valid. And sometimes I
Mhm.
think that there are parts that need to do that. You might be 25, if you're in therapy, you might be 25 minutes into therapy with the part who's like, F this, I'm not doing it this week. See you next week.
Yeah.
And you leave and
Hmm.
you take care of yourself. You do the best you can and try again.
Yep. Yeah. Ongoing commitment. Because if not, the alternative is not so great. And to remember that you're not alone. Like, even sometimes when I'm walking through things, I'm like, it can feel, no matter what you're going through, like you're incredibly alone. Just remember there's people out there experiencing things, even if they're not putting words to it. I remember when I did my interview for USA Today, and I was so rattled
Yep.
after, right? Because it's a disclosure. And I said, like, because I had shared some parts' names, and I don't usually do that publicly, but for teaching, I sometimes will. It's a balance, it's a system agreement thing. What do we feel safe with? What do we not? I had talked more about Joey, who's the male part, and I didn't know if it was going to show up in the paper, like all these things, right? And I remember being told, like, some people aren't as brave as you, because I was feeling alone. Like, other people are not doing this. Like, why am I? And I thought about that, and I was like, I don't even see it as other people aren't, because I think bravery is happening behind closed doors with
Yep.
people that aren't sharing anything. You know what I mean? I think it's more about, we all have to remember that we're all navigating things, and it's not a competition thing about who can share this or that. And to always remember we're not alone, even when people are not saying things.
Yes. Very true. And if there's a way to find community, whether that's in mentorship groups or online communities, or you can find some folks on social media, whatever it is, like just feeling like there are some people that you can interact with who reflect a little bit about what your life is like, it's helpful. Because when you feel like you're the only one,
Yeah.
That's when it's really hard.
Yeah. That's why I love doing my mentorship program. It's not just because age is the one facilitating it. It's because I'm learning also from the participants. Like, yes, there are boundaries because we're facilitating it and there's structure and a time we start and end. And, I share less because I'm obviously taking up less space so they can take up space. But, just that sense of being in community. And I pre screen everybody, make sure people feel ready to dive in. I'm selective in a sense of like, I just want people to be at that place where they want to do the work. They want to connect with other people. They might still have anxiety about it, but they're feeling like they're ready to take on, that aspect. And the beauty that I've witnessed of just other people connecting and then they continue to connect after the mentorship program is over, that warms my heart because even for me, it's a sense of, oh, I'm not alone. I might be facilitating this, but here's these people that are putting their trust into me to hold this space
Yeah,
for them to come together. Right? I'm not doing the work for them. I'm just sharing things that have helped. We have little activities. Some of their parts will engage, some won't. Some develop connection with each other after the group. I mean, it's just a beautiful thing. And I think all humans, regardless of DID, could benefit from some level of mentorship and community.
absolutely. We were not
You know?
designed to go through this world alone
Mhm.
completely.
No. Yeah.
Really great
Yeah.
takeaways today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's nice to just talk authentically, and I feel really safe with you. The parts really like you and respect you, and it's easy to talk authentically with you. Where, if you get somebody who's interviewing you that you haven't met and you don't, it's the parts get uneasy, right? But with you, it just kind of flows, and I never know what the heck's going to come out of my mouth, but a lot of it just comes directly from my heart and whatever I'm experiencing at the time. And I'm a messy, imperfect, completely flawed human. And if anything I share or my mess helps somebody else, that's what I'm really here for.
Yeah. It's funny because I'm want to just say, oh, right back at you. Like it's so comfortable to, and it always has been really comfortable to be able to talk with all of you and get to know you and develop the friendship that we've been developing for quite a while now.
Yeah, and I appreciate you all hanging in there too because I haven't been emotionally available to my I'm like barely emotionally available to Mabel, and I love that woman with my whole heart. I've just been going through so much.
Well, isn't that what friendship's about? Being able to see what other people are going through, and when they need space, you give them space. When they can connect, you connect.
Right. I remember too what Anna Lynn McCord had said when I did a podcast with her, and she was like, "Sometimes I just want to lay down and stare at a wall because it's a lot to be me." And I thought, damn, like that's sometimes what I do. I like curl up with a dog and I just lay down and I just stare at the wall and go, I don't know what the fuck I'm going to do with my life, but today I just need to stare at the fucking wall and not talk to anyone.
I have been known to say I'm going outside to watch grass grow.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I don't need to tackle the world today. I don't need to close a business deal today. I just need to fucking stare at the
Yep.
wall.
Very therapeutic, actually. Highly recommend.
Yeah, well, it is meditative in a way, right? And even for me, like some people are not great with meditation, especially in the beginning of the healing from trauma journey, right? Because it's requires you to sit with feelings and stillness and all the things. So sometimes I'm like, I'm staring at the fan, so I'm not technically meditating, but in a way I am,
Yeah.
you know?
Meditation is great. It's also partially dissociative, which makes it fun sometimes.
Yeah. Just one thing, my biggest takeaway from my healing intensive, this most recent one, which was on mending heart wounds and grief and loss, and things like divorce and death and things like that. And one of the things I walked away with that was like a huge gratitude for having DID because dissociation and all of those parts got me right to where I am today. And sure, life has not been easy. There's been some really beautiful moments, there's been some amazing accomplishments, but I would have never survived my childhood without it.
Yes.
And where I think about where I'm going, creating a life with Mabel and doing all of these things that her and I want to do that are way off the cusp of anything related to psychology, I think if I would have given up, then I wouldn't have gotten to experience this love that I have with her, which is so sacred and special, and building the dream life that we both deserve. And I'm going to be 43 in August. And this is the first time, really, genuinely in my life that I feel free and happy. 43 years.
I'm glad you got there, though. It's been a long ass time.
Yeah, and it's going to be work to maintain that, right? I still got to work my recovery. I still got to cope with my parts. I still got to teach them new things. I'm still going to have more fusions or integrations, right? Doesn't mean that the path ahead is not bumpy, but it's a lot more beautiful than it ever has been.
And you're both going to be going through that parallel process, right? So you're navigating each other's recoveries and each other's integrations and fusions and
Yeah.
beautiful and
Yeah.
complex. But I guess that's life, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much for today.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Like I said, we could talk for hours on hours about all kinds of topics, but I really appreciate just talking with you and being given the space to open up a little bit about all the things and hoping that it really, I don't know, hoping that something we say resonates with somebody where they can take
Yeah.
away and just not feel alone and to embrace the mess. Magic is in the mess.
That's my hope too, that somebody somewhere is finding things that they just needed to hear, whether it's encouragement to stay
Yeah.
on the path or encouragement to go back and work more on their communication or to be more reflective or whatever it is, to be creative. Who knows?
Hmm.
But like you, I hope that people get lots of great takeaways from this. I think they will. It's been a really fun conversation. And as always, love how you showed up for it. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having us.
And to all who are listening, first, thank you so much for being here. This episode truly has so many tips for healing in it. And as you listen to Adrienne Co share their journey, we hope that you also notice the strategies that they use, that they reference throughout this conversation. There's a lot of work that goes into becoming a system that works together. And when life throws its inevitable curveballs, that work can intensify. And they did a really great job of showing that and also just illustrating how perseverance is key. So, whatever you do, never give up. We believe in you. Keep going. And until next time, let's keep healing. Thank you for tuning in. You can find our blog on Substack at healingmyparts.substack.com and on Instagram at healingmyparts. Just a disclaimer, any information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for professional therapy or behavioral health care. Nor does listening to the podcast constitute a therapist-client relationship. Please be sure to take extra good care of you. And until next time, keep healing and thriving.